Go ahead.
So this morning we're just going to talk a little bit about the parent side of things. A lot of the sessions and stuff what we do it focuses on the student, like student tools. How can you get students to do their work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of stuff with the students. One of the big things that is important to realize is that many times the key to getting the students to do the work is to getting the parents involved in the work a little bit, or at least engaged in what their kids are doing. And this presents a lot of challenges right now, especially because you have so many different family situations. Um, for the most part, you know, students who choose to do cyber school or online education during the regular school year, especially at the younger levels, elementary levels, have parents or somebody at home who's willing to help them through that process. Right now, we have a lot of elementary kids at home with nobody there to help them through any kind of process. Because their parents are deemed essential workers or they're working from home full time, and how do you do that? Um, so we're looking at how to increase that parent support and engagement a little bit. And there's only so much you can do as a teacher, but there are some things to consider. So we want to ask the question: why do we want to engage the parents? Um, well, a few reasons. Number one, if parents are engaged in what their kids are doing, and they're engaged in the whole process, they can help their students complete the work. This is really no different than the classroom environment. You want your parents to be engaged there too, so that students taking home projects or homework or something like that are getting assistance in completing it, and they're also getting, like, encouraged to complete it on a normal time. Um, we want parents to understand that it is important, you know, that it's important that the students do their work and aren't just allowed to take a vacation during this time. And especially for parents who are incredibly busy or who don't see the value in school, this can be difficult. Um, and once that is understood, it's important to engage parents because they can provide a home life that is conducive to uh, completing work rather than like a really loud, uh, you know, environment. Who knows what it could look like? Lots of different things. So, a general rule of thumb, um, really, as student ability goes up, the necessity of parent engagement goes down. And it could almost be said as student ability or student engagement as well. As the students are more engaged and able to do work, uh, the net need of parents to engage goes down. And you can see this even in the regular schooling, like, kindergarten level. They need help with homework or stuff like that, and parents come to the classroom. They help out in the room as volunteers, and by the time you're a senior in high school, you have the students have senioritis or whatever like that, and they parents don't even know what's going on in the school anymore sometimes. But they don't need that assistance or that engagement. And at that point, teachers are engaging directly with the student to be like, hey, let's fix what these problems are. Um, so just thinking about engagement and increasing in engagement, I'm going to talk about three kind of categories, three areas of that we can focus on. And the biggest one, and probably the most important, and this is even something that in the classroom is worth thinking about, are kind of the logistical pieces. The biggest one being, especially right now, what is the role of the parent in their students' learning? And this is going to differ by district depending on. Um, I mean, I think every single school district in our region is doing something different right now, so it's really going to be different. But probably one of the biggest um, or contentious issues in this role thing is, number one, are the parents considered a learning coach, where their primary responsibility is to encourage and give students the time, or are they being considered a secondary educator? And what do they see themselves as? Do they see themselves as just a coach and an encourager, or as a secondary educator? And I've talked to some of my friends' parents, and I have some friends. I have a friend with a kid who's in kindergarten, and the mom is like, I'm trying to do this stuff that the teacher's sending home for reading, but gosh darn it, I can teach reading better to my kid because it requires reading, not doing these online activities with this website that I can't access, blah 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 blah. And I'd rather just sit them down with a book and read to them. And there's a conflict there, as far as what the teacher expects the kid to do and the parent to do, and what the parent sees as is a better option to do, and the reality of maybe what is working in their home. Um, and so this kind of goes into the number two there, like what expectations are set for the parents. And I don't know any data about our district for this, and I know that there's been a lot of letters and communications sent home, but has and any of it been with the sole purpose or the purpose of training parents on what is expected of them during this time of closure? Do parents have any idea, or are they just getting bombarded with all these tools and this access, and your kids have to go to this Zoom and that Zoom, and um, but what are the parents' roles in all that? What kind of tips or tricks, or what are their expectations? And some of that kind of feeds into the next two pieces. Are they expected to set a schedule for their students as far as what their students are supposed to do during the school day? Is the school setting this schedule, and are the parents supposed to get the kids to the scheduled activities? And do the parents know what that schedule is? And is it realistic, especially for parents who might be working during that schedule of activities? And in the home environment, are parents supposed to, set up a schooling area in the house for their kids, or are the kids working at the kitchen table where it's really loud and there's cooking going on in young kids? Um, so, uh, taking it in order of importance, like this little cartoon here. This is the real me. Me is real. I really am reality. And how dare you not live up to my expectations? And I think a lot of parents are feeling this from the school districts. I think school districts have a lot of expectations about what kids will do and how parents will support that, and without any consideration as to what the reality of the parent's home life is. And I think a lot of times we're focused on internet access and getting materials there, and not, how can we train parents on how to do this? Like, we're sending packets home, but are we just sending packets home, or are we giving parents instructions like, this is the content. If you have this much time, you could do this. If you don't have enough time to get this done, maybe you could focus on this instead. Or there are alternative activities. A lot of it revolves around time, because and thinking especially for elementary students, if you have first graders and kindergartners who can't read yet, or are very slow readers, and the parents are expected to do a lot of this reading and essentially being a secondary educator beside them. um, yeah, what are the expectations? A very just kind of important thing. uh, a schedule. This is uh, a schedule for this, and this is more for full-time cyber kids. I pulled this from one of our presentations about setting up a day for, and this would be for like an upper elementary student. Expectations for the day. We all know that kids thrive on routines, um, and this is still true for parents as well. So creating some kind of schedule where the parents know that they have time to work if they're working full time, or to get stuff done, it can be very important. And as a teacher, it's something we can help parents work through and schedule. And maybe it's a different schedule than this. And this is pretty comprehensive here. So some parents are really into this kind of thing, and some are this would be a lot. To do. So I'm not holding this up as an example of this is what a schedule for a kid needs to look like. What I will point out, though, is that the actual instructional time in this schedule, and this is a full-time elementary student, is just 3 hours, and that's it. And requiring parents to do any more than that, and then also requiring students to do any more than that is going to be too much. Um, yeah, and this, as an aside, as I'm looking at this and I was researching this, we think of, this is a conversation for another day. But think about this is a great time to think about the amount of homework that is being sent home, even during the regular school year, because you're requiring how much instruction during the school day. Um, And if in an online environment we're only requiring for a full load 3 or 4 hours of instruction in everything, then what's the point of that homework? Because you're essentially doubling the, you have stories of of kids who are doing 2 to 3 hours of homework a night on top of their instructional time, which is interesting. I will leave it at that for now. So, and then the home environment, and I would encourage every teacher to spend some time talking with your parents on how the environment is set up at home. Don't assume that parents know how to set up a good working learning environment. Um, because I even on a lot of these Zoom calls, I see, and I've talked to educators who their home environment is terrible for working, and I've talked to someone like I try a different room every day because I can't settle on one that's a good place where I'm not distracted, and they're taking over the dining room table or the kitchen, and then it gets in the way of meal prep and stuff like that, and those struggles are real, but they're things that you can think through, and maybe the parent hasn't thought through, and maybe the kid's just sitting on the couch in front of the TV because they haven't put any thought to it. Uh, but thinking through that, the home environment too is a way you can get parents involved in the learning and engaged, and engage in the whole household in setting up a spot that is conducive for learning for these kids. Um, so the next one I want to think about is involvement, and uh, really the big question here, and I included apps because there's lots of parent involvement apps out there that we've talked about throughout these webinars, and a lot of districts are kind of set in those, and I don't want to go off that bunny trail now because hopefully you're using something and it's working. But the real question I have is, how have you included parents in your activities in your classroom? Um, and this, depending on what you're using, if you're using like a Flipgrid style video thing, or if you're having live Zoom meetings, have you put any thought into including parents in those activities? You can do just like in the classroom, you could have parents come on, you could do show and tell, you could do bring your parent to work day or school day type activities. You could have some parents, maybe you have a sign up list and have parents read books to your elementary students. Let's say you're doing recordings of stories for guided reading or something like that. Maybe you have some parents who would love to read and have a different voice speak to your elementary school students. Um, but how have you included them, and how have you included them, and how can you include them? Some parents will be too busy and they don't want to deal with that, but I bet there are some parents who would love to be involved still in their students' classroom, especially at the younger levels. Um, maybe that, and so there's just some ideas on how to do that, uh, and maybe take some of the burden off you as the teacher of recording video after video of you doing stuff or reading or presenting stuff to your students. Um, there's this little picture of a dad reading a book, story time. And then communication. And the communication to parents, really isn't any different than when you have your in classroom environment. Are you calling home? Are you letting your parents know when your kids are doing good things with their schoolwork? Are you letting parents know when their kids are not doing good things with their schoolwork and they need to improve and do some more? Have you had any parent-teacher conferences, via Zoom? And do you have any kind of communication system in place via texting or phones? And this includes a lot of the apps like Seesaw, Class Dojo, Remind, and stuff like that. So, do you have a plan in place where you are communicating not just with students and not just through the automated ways, but like you're actually touching base with the parents? And in that conversation, I would encourage you to ask the parents how they are doing with this online education. Don't just focus on the student. Um, but take the time to be like, hey, is there anything you need as a parent to make this experience better for you and your students? Or is there any way I can support you as the parent, and focus on them a little bit, because this is overwhelming for a lot of parents. Um, and a little support, especially in the communication area, goes a long way. If parents know that you are accessible and willing to help them out and willing to make accommodations, especially when they run into problems or they have problems getting stuff done or timing or stuff like that. So That's just kind of a brief overview of how to engage your parents and some activities that are possible, and uh, yeah, just some ideas that I had when it comes to online learning and parent engagement. So I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and you guys feel free to ask any questions.